Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, and as always, I'm joined by James. James, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks. We've got a fun episode for everyone today. Today, we're going to be looking at how to fix Golgari in Cube. Now, recently, we did an episode on how to fix Selesnya, and I think we can all agree Selesnya has more problems. But we got a lovely comment asking to do Golgari next, and I thought, I love Golgari, that's a great idea, let's do that next. So before we get into that, down in the show notes, there will be a card gallery along with timecodes. While you're down there, please consider giving the podcast a 5-star review, thumbs up, all that goodness greatly helps us out. So, with today, we are going to be focusing on how you can fix issues that generally come up with a Golgari section. In high power level cubes, the stereotype is everyone's first draft is you end up in a Golgari deck because you take your removal, you take your ramp. These are the things that we're told as Magic players you need to focus on when you're drafting. But then we end up going 0-3 to a bunch of people playing blue cards. Or, because it's 2026, a bunch of people playing Boros cards. But like, James, just kind of like, from a high level point of view, kind of like, why does Golgari Midrange tend to not work in like higher powered level cubes?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of mid-range deck, people often just prioritize 3 and 4 mana mythic rares with lots of words on them, right? Because they look like
the best cards in Magic, James.
Exactly. Words proportional to power level. And people are coming at it with the mindset of limited, right? And these look like classic limited bombs, and people take them. And the problem is you're not quick enough to go under the blue decks, and you don't have enough card advantage. You don't have enough late game to play a long game against them, and you end up just having a really poor matchup there. And theoretically, that means, okay, you should do better against the smaller decks, the more aggressive decks, but in reality, like, the Boros decks of the world, the white-based decks in general, have staying power into the late game as well. So it's not like you're even necessarily beating up on those decks, and you kind of end up in this awkward middle ground where you're prolonging the late game to a late game that you can't win, and you end up in a really tough spot.
Yeah, exactly. And then kind of as we kind of come down the power level, where in theory, like where mid-range is better, Golgari can still struggle here as well, and it often comes down to like effectively like how we're building our graveyard deck, because like graveyard decks I've seen from a lot of cube lists just do lack focus. Like there's this idea of like we throw in a Stitcher Supplier, we throw in a Spider Spawning and some other Graveyard Matters cards, and then kind of like we call it a deck. But kind of like from my experience anyway, kind of those also tend to not work as well. Kind of James, what's your experience with kind of like Golgari graveyard soup sections that kind of you've played in like lower powered level cubes?
Yeah, it's really easy to be coming up with a list of archetypes and say, okay, well, Golgari is going to be graveyards. Great. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all my favorite draft formats, which all have a Golgari graveyard deck, and I'm going to pick out my favorite rares and uncommons from all of those, and those are going in my gold slot, and that's what my Golgari deck is doing. And the problem is that the Golgari graveyard decks in all those draft formats wanted slightly different things, right? Some of them maybe wanted you to have specifically creatures in your graveyard. Some of them want you to get specific cards in your graveyard to recur them and flash them back. Some of them just wanted a big number of cards in your graveyard so that you could delve them away. And whilst some amount of generic self-mill is going to enable all of that stuff, you actually need specific cards, and you need your graveyard cards to work together. It is not generally just a case of, if I have 8 cards in my graveyard, then all of these cards are going to be brilliant. Like, take a card like Spider Spawning, for example. It's really easy to build a really good self-mill deck that can put half of its deck in its graveyard by turn 6, but it only has like 10 creatures, so your Spider Spawning still sucks. And if you're trying to support Spider Spawning, that's fine, but you need to really prioritize self-mill cards that are creatures. You need to enable the Golgari deck to get to that creature count. That might not play so well with some of the other graveyard themes, or with cards that, mechanics like Delve, mechanics like Scavenge, which sometimes crop up in these graveyard sections, but actually exile cards from your graveyard as part of a cost. You can only support so many of those. without impacting your other Graveyard Matters cards. So you need to think about how all these Graveyard Matter cards are going to actually mesh and play together and come together for a coherent plan. If some of them are leaning very aggressive and some of them are much more grindy, again, there's a little bit of tension there. It's not that these graveyard decks can't work, but as a cube designer, you need to be thinking a little bit more deeply than just Golgari is going to be doing a graveyard thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the plan for today is we're going to break down a bunch of different archetypes and a bunch of different ways you can kind of lean your Golgari section to make it more focused and to give it the best chance of putting up the numbers that you want from a deck in your cube. We're going to try and give you those ideas to, as James was touching on, to focus them around what you want to do. Probably about half of these will be graveyard-related strategies, but half of them are not. There is other things you can do in Golgari that is cool and good, and we will try and touch on as many as possible in the next hour or so. So let's actually start off with the package that is kind of leading the charge in Powered Cube in terms of what Golgari, what a Golgari deck can be built towards, and that's the Chain of Smog combo. Now, we're not going to spend too much time on this, as we did kind of touch on it recently as it was brought up in our conversations of recent updates to the Mitgo Vintage Cube, but I'll read Chain of Smog because it's an old one, but a good one. Chain of Smog is 1 and a black for a sorcery. Target player discards 2 cards. That player may copy this spell and may choose a new target for that copy. James, how are we comboing off with this innocuous sorcery from Onslaught?
Yeah, so the joke with this card is that whilst it is an okay as a sort of mind rot with downside, is sort of how it was imagined, right, for 2 mana. And that's fine. You can play it like that. But as a combo card, what we're actually looking to do here is target ourselves with Chain of Smog. We discard 2 cards, not a great deal. But that then gives us the choice with whether we want to copy it. And we can copy it and we can target ourselves again. And it doesn't matter if we don't have cards in hand. We can just keep copying it, keep targeting ourselves. And basically, if we have anything that is triggering off us copying that spell, we can go infinite with that. So the premier option here is Witherbloom Apprentice. This is a green and a black for a 2/2 from original Strixhaven. Has Magecraft, so whenever you cast or copy a spell, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that's actually a really nice, clean 2-card, 4-mana combo, right? Generally, 2-card combos cost a lot more than that to assemble in total. You don't have to untap with any creatures, anything like that. Pretty nice, pretty clean. We like it. That being said, this combo has a lot of risks attached, and there's a reason that it is powerful, and I think it does earn a spot in these high power level cubes, but it is not that often that you actually see it being played. A big issue is that if your opponent has creature removal, it's not just like, oh, my combo didn't work, I'll keep playing the game, because if you cast your Witherbloom Apprentice, you cast your Chain of Smog, you target yourself, your opponent doesn't have to respond at that point. Your opponent can then let you discard 2 cards. If you still have cards in hand, they can let you discard 2 more cards until you have no cards left, and then they can kill the Witherbloom Apprentice. And at that point, the game is kind of over and you have lost. So if I'm playing this combo, I really value hand disruption or even just a way to see my opponent's hand, like a Gitaxian Probe goes a long way here, because you really can't just be jamming this into open mana most of the time. It is very high risk, but it's super efficient. When it works, it's really good.
No, exactly. So this is kind of it. I'm not going to call it a deck because the Mitgo Vintage Cube doesn't really work with like archetypes. It's more like a bunch of good cards and then some cool packages to kind of make a deck. That's kind of what Chain of Smog is. It's Chain of Smog plus Witherbloom Apprentice. And does what's the other one? It doesn't win the game straight away, but it does.
Yeah, Sedgemoor Witch is the one you see as the sort of backup Witherbloom Apprentice a lot of the time. The upside of Sedgemoor Witch is it's a much better card on its own. It's a 3 mana 3/2 and maybe has a ward cost, and Magecraft you make a 1/1 pest. So kind of a legit card on its own, but way worse as a combo piece because you give your opponent the chance to untap.
But it is nice that there is some redundancy in the deck. Like, nothing replaces Chain of Smog, but on the other half, we do have 2 bits, and kind of like, if you wanted to support this package in your cube, kind of like as James has touched on, things like hand attack, which you will generally see in a black section anyway, but just making sure you have it there so this deck can protect itself. But also, I'm assuming, James, because it's a combo, things like Demonic Tutor or other ways of searching cards from your deck are going to be things you want to run to make this deck actually come together.
Yeah, for sure. Even your like sort of lower tier tutors like the Imperial Seals and whatnot, when you have a very efficient 2-card combo like this, those cards sort of really justify their place in a way which they wouldn't have otherwise. Another interesting thing I've been able to do before with this combo is that if you have exactly Spellseeker in your deck, then all of a sudden your creature tutor stuff can set up all of this combo. So you can like Birthing Pod into the whole combo, which is quite cool. Which is maybe a little more niche, but like does come up, you know? But yeah, I think this can be, if you have the ways to make it consistent and you have the right disruption, this can be pretty nice. I will say, though, it very much doesn't need to be in a straight green-black deck. I'd say probably the most common place you see this is like you're splashing it in blue-black or even blue-green. Just having some card selection out of blue goes a long way in this sort of combo deck.
No, it makes sense. And kind of like when we've talked about this before, I think that my judgment of this package is judged on the fact that it's in the Mitgo Vintage Cube. I personally think from a power level point of view, it's not Mitgo Vintage power level, if that makes sense, compared to a lot of the other things that you see in that cube. But it is something unique that Golgari colors and Golgari splashes can do, which is why I think it's there. It isn't an extra 2-card combo, and in the Boris Menace world we're in now, just having more combos that are playable is nice. James, what power level of cube do you think can support the Chain of Smog combos? Like, do you like it in the Mitgo Vintage Cube, or do you like it somewhere a bit lower power level? Like, do you see it potentially showing up in a more mid-range or budget style environment? Because like, I think Chain of Smog is about a tenner, but I can't imagine any of the other pieces, any of the Magecraft pieces are too expensive.
I wouldn't put it in like a budget cube because I think it is just not the play experience that you sign up for with that sort of cube. Like, I'm going to have drafted my like janky bunch of card advantage nonsense, and my opponent is going to kill me on turn 3, you know? And generally in that sort of cube, you just don't have that option, right? It's not that it would necessarily be like the best card in the cube, but I think in most of those cubes, it's not the play experience you're going for. In the Vintage Cube, I don't mind it. I think it is sort of at the lower end of the power level of cards in that cube. But something has to be on the lower end, and I'm kind of here for having more stuff like that rather than more mediocre creatures that attack and block, you know? There's kind of enough of those.
So my main experience of it was in my unpowered Vintage Cube, where I didn't really like it that much, but I can see a world where just having, like, my unpowered Vintage Cube doesn't have Demonic Tutor in it. I can see a world where just having more just, like, super efficient shooter, because, like, it's a thing of, like, you take Demonic Tutor early because it's good and great, and then you see Chain of Smog later because it can wheel and stuff. I can see a world where kind of, like, you can come into this deck and, like, you could have a good control deck, and then that's your win con. That's kind of the point of Chain of Smog there, is it is more of a package. But yeah, but to be fair, it is one for higher power level cubes, but there is probably a world where it would be okay in, like, not budget, but kind of like in cubes where there are other combos and you're looking for something for Golgari to do, but you don't have the full-on tutor or like fast mana to really kind of like make this consistently a turn 2 or 3 win. That might be a nice place for it.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
All right, let's keep it going. Let's move on to some of the graveyard decks. Probably the meat and veg of this episode in terms of just like what Golgari is, like the amount of sets where it's just what's Golgari doing? Graveyard. Marvelous. But let's actually dive into that and actually kind of, we split it down into 3 different decks, 3 different graveyard decks. The first thing we're going to break it down to is number of creatures in your graveyard. Now, some cards do care about permanence, but the majority of Graveyard Matters cards for a long time anyway, cared about the number of creatures. So that's the kind of the first one we're going to be looking at. We will be looking at things leaving your graveyard and Delerium in a little bit, but this is specifically number of creatures in your graveyard. This is the spider spawning style deck. I'll read spider spawning for those unaware. Spider spawning is 4 and a green for a sorcery. It reads, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach for each creature card in your graveyard, and it has flashback for 6 and a black. So why this is great in a graveyard deck is we fill our deck full of self-mill cards, we mill all of our stuff, and then even if we mill the spider spawning, we can still make a big army of tokens. But there's a bunch of other cards that do a similar thing. Like basically, if you go to any kind of the older Innistrad sets, you'll see some cards that do this. But we have a card like Jared Golgari Lichlord. Jared is black, green for a 2/2 legendary creature zombie elf. It gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard, and it has pay 1, a black and a green to sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to sacrifice creature's power, and you can sacrifice a swamp and a forest to return it from your graveyard to your hand. These are kind of like signposty standard payoffs for this deck. They are either cards that make us creatures equal to the number of creatures in our graveyard, or they're cards that get bigger equal to the number of creatures in our graveyard. We're combining these with cards like Sata Wayfinder and Stitch Supplier. These are cheap creatures. They are 1 or 2 mana that come down and put some cards from our deck into our graveyard. That's kind of how we are making the deck work. Some other nice payoffs for this type of deck is a card like Living Death. This gets better if you have ways of returning it from the graveyard in case you mill it, but Living Death basically, it's sort of a board wipe. If you just mill a bunch of stuff into your bin, it basically resets, it basically swaps the board with your grave, it basically swaps both players' boards with their graveyard. So you cast Living Death with a stocked graveyard, and you probably then win the game. James, from your experience, how have you seen these type of decks play out?
Yeah, these can work quite well. And the nice thing here, right, is that there's a pretty big range of payoffs depending on sort of what power level you're going for. You're not going to run out of them. There's loads of them. They're in every other set. Izoni Thousand Eyes is one I quite like.
That's a nice one. Yeah.
For 6 mana, 2/3, but at ETBs you make 1/1s equal to the number of cards in graveyard, or number of creatures in graveyard, and you can play Golgari and sack a creature to gain life and draw a card. That card's quite strong. These generally play out as very grindy. You're going to play a bunch of little dudes, you're going to block with them, you're going to stock up your graveyard, and then from sort of turn 5, turn 6, you're going to start playing these haymakers that actually start paying you off. It's generally not the like turbo mill myself, aggro you out with things that care plan. It's more playing that long game. But it can certainly combine with some more aggressive draws if you're trying to support something like Vengevine or whatever. You know, that can be a very aggressive card. But yeah, in general, it's going to be a grindy deck. With things like the enablers, hot take, I think Stitcher Supplier is very overrated for this sort of deck. Like, unless you're really, really, really all in, I'd much rather have like a 2 mana one that gets me a card back than the 1 mana just mill free, but I'm just kind of down a card because my 1/1 isn't really a card.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. It's why I think Stitch Supplier could see play. It's because it is specifically a creature. Like, I like it more than just, like, in this build anyway, I like it more than just an enchantment that mills or something like that. But like, I think it's safe to say this is what I would consider to be the stock graveyard Golgari deck. If someone's saying we're doing Golgari graveyard, this is what I'm thinking of. And this can see play in most power level of cubes. It probably doesn't get, like, Spider Spawning specifically, I think is too slow for a lot of cubes, but the kind of just cards that get better for having things in your graveyard. Like there's so many of them. There's like the Planeswalker Grist, for example, that has a win con. Like that self mills you, and also has an ultimate that wins you the game, basically, if you have a big graveyard. Like, there are so many different ones to suit any power level, which is probably why it is the stock archetype. Like, there's pauper versions of this, there's peasant versions of this, there's budget versions of this, there's expensive versions of this. This is the stock version, but it does have some pitfalls, and that's kind of what we wanted to focus on in this episode, is that, as James touched on earlier, like if I really don't think you should have a spider spawning deck with a Gurmag Angler in a cube, because they want different things. Like you can't have cards that care about how many things you have in your graveyard and then also things that eat your graveyard. I'll read Gurmag Angler for those unaware. It's is 6 and a black for a 5/5 with Delve. So that means you can remove a card from your graveyard and use that to reduce the casting cost of your Golgari Angler. You can't have it both ways. You kind of either need to go, you're using your graveyard as a resource to eat and power these Delve spells, or you want your payoffs with things like spider spawning. They don't really go together. It's called a non-bow.
I played a cube recently where the Golgari was listed as Graveyard Matters, and the two like face cards on the private page for that were Spider Spawning and Hogak. I was like, I will jump through a lot of hoops to play Spider Spawning, but these cards are not the same. You have a 0 mana 8/8 and like make 5 spiders on turn 6 or something, you know. Let's bounce up our levels here, and yeah, we've got, if you're trying to make something like Spider Spawning work, you have to not be consuming that graveyard for other purposes. There are plenty of graveyard playoffs where you get paid for having stuff in your graveyard without getting rid of that stuff from the graveyard.
Yeah, and importantly, we're not saying like the odd thing can't come out. Like, I'm still going to run a Reanimate in a spider spawning deck, for example, but like specifically stuff that's eating my graveyard, those don't go together. And like, when you're building this deck, I think you need to pick. Do I want... Yeah, Hogak is Hogak better than Golgari Angler, but like, that is a better example of choosing the line. What do you want, basically? There are some other things to keep in mind with this deck as well, is that I don't think it works as well when you just play it like a combo deck. You have to interact with your opponent. This is not vintage Dredge. You can't just ignore what your opponent is doing and just try and turbo it out. You can't just mill... You can't just spend the first 4 or 5 turns of the game milling, ignoring your opponent's board, and then play your spider spawning. Because is that going to be good enough? If they've played 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, and you've just been milling and made a bunch of 1/2s, is that going to win you the game? Do you not need something else? Do you need to dread return a Crater Hoof back as well? Like think about these things. Like James, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would generally not assume I'm going to be the quickest deck at the table with this stuff. I would assume that I'm going to have to interact early to stay in the game. But kind of the good news there is that if the other people's plan is to attack you on the ground, blocking is interacting, and blocking works very well with our plan because it puts our creatures into the graveyard. But yes, you certainly do need to have some removal, have a bit of hand attack to slow down whatever synergistic things your opponent is doing.
No, it makes sense. And hopefully with those little bit of tips, if you have a graveyard section in your cube that is just caring about the number of things, that's something that can help you. Let's move on to our next one, which is more of a newer way they're taking it. And this is things leaving your graveyard matters. So what this deck is trying to do is mill yourself or put things into your graveyard a little bit, and then you get rewarded when they move zones. The signpost card here is Insidious Roots. This is a black and a green for an enchantment. It says creature tokens you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color, and then whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 green plant creature token with a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. Now this Insidious Roots is an awesome card, but here you see it doesn't care about how many cards are in your graveyard, just that something has left your graveyard. So if we combine that with a card like Torch's Existence, that's a single black for an enchantment. It has black, choose and discard a creature card, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So with a creature in our graveyard and a creature in our hand, for a black mana we just swap zones, something's left our graveyard, and we trigger Insidious Roots. And we can do that a bunch of times depending on the black mana that we have. It does not need a big graveyard, it needs more specific pieces. And there's a bunch of other options. Like, they are printing more and more cards that reward us for this. There's like Chalk Outline, there's Skeleton Crew, Tevel the Balanced Scale, and Sir Conrad the Grim. Like, there's a bunch of other ones, but those are some good ones. But basically they all do a similar thing of when a card leaves our graveyard, or when a creature leaves our graveyard, we make a token, or we're rewarded. James, what do you think about like this kind of archetype? Because I know you're a big Insidious Roots fan. Actually, as are we all, but...
Yeah, I think this deck's really cool. It can be the good thing is we're getting more redundancy for it, right? The issue initially was that there was only 1 Insidious Roots. Chalk Outline was way worse. That's a bit tough, but yeah, we're getting more like quite a good rate now. It's not that difficult to enable it. I would say with cards like Tortured Existence specifically, that card is so efficient at enabling this that it can almost end up feeling more like a 2-card combo at times if you have Tortured Existence and a Roots or something else that cares in your deck. Which is fine. You can obviously build that, but if you're at a slightly lower power level, or sometimes it's just kind of more fun to make people do a bit more work for it, you know? Like, to me, it is more fun to be like, okay, I've got like a Bloodghast and a sack outlet, and I'm going to like keep recurring lands back and getting multiple triggers a turn as that comes in and out. That's kind of cooler than just, I have found my Tortured Existence and now I win, you know? But I think they can both work. I think this archetype is cool and pretty different, and also doesn't have to be like the whole thing your Golgari section is doing. It, you know, a lot of the cards you can use to support this are good in the other graveyard decks. You do need to mill yourself, put creatures in your yard. We like creatures leaving our yard generally anyway, because it means they're going to other places where they might impact the game state. So you can often tag this on as a little bit of a sub-archetype, and that can work pretty well.
Exactly. Like this is the deck where you can run the Gurmag Angler, because like with Delve, with Delve you will only ever make one token, I believe, also particularly with Insidious Roots, but other cards are worded differently. But like this is where you can run the I'm going to eat my graveyard cards, because it actually works with what the deck is trying to do. This is a difference to the previous deck we talked about. Previous one was number of creatures. This is cares about things leaving, and using your graveyard as a resource with things like Delve is doing that. But yeah. James also mentioned like aggressive black creatures, that like recursive black creatures. They're also great in this, having ways of looping those around. And yeah, I do agree on the Tortured Existence front. Like that's probably the top tier of this deck. But like Insidious Roots isn't uncommon. Like Sir Conrad isn't uncommon. A bunch of the other options are uncommon. So there is definitely a lower powered version of this. There's a this one probably stops around Peasant. But there's Peasant, there's Budget, there's lower powered level ones, and like there's a world where I have Insidious Roots in my main cube because it's the James Andrew Invitational card for winning 5. Or was it 10? No, that was for when you won 10. But like maybe in my next update we add Tortured Existence because it probably could put up numbers there. Or at a worst, we'll train wreck you for the future, and that's ultimately the goal of everything I do.
I can train wreck myself in that cube. I don't need the help.
No, 100%. But yeah, it just shows that kind of like it is a flexible graveyard. It is a flexible deck that is also getting a bunch more bits. But talking of, let's move on to our next strategy that is also getting more bits, and that's Delerium. So the plan for a Delerium deck is different to the other two. It's not trying to put as many of a thing in the graveyard as possible. It's trying to get a variety of things. So we use Delerium as the shorthand for saying different types in the graveyard. So like Delerium specifically rewards you when you have 4 or more types, but we also include things like our Pyroglyphs and our Barrogoyphs in here that just want different things. So you have payoffs, things like Grimflayer or like Balustrade Worm. They both have the word they both have the word Delerium on them. They are Delerium payoffs that they get better if we have different things in our graveyard. But also you have a card like Ursine Monstrosity or Barrogoyph and Tarmogoyph and lower powered level cubes. These get better when you have a variety of things in your graveyard. But that's how these get better. And also, as we're saying up front, that this can be a bit more of a Jundi archetype, because red does give us some important things like looting, things like just additional payoffs, things like Bitter Reunion might not seem like the most broken card, but in a Delerium deck, it's a 1 red for an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards, and you can sacrifice it for a single colorless to give your creatures haste. So effectively, this is a looter that's putting things in your graveyard and then puts itself in the graveyard. You get a lot of those kind of looting effects from red, along with some cool Delerium creatures themselves, things like Dragon Rage Channeler. Kind of like James, as an archetype, like how have you found Delerium? This is also something that, because a version of this is in the Mitgo Vintage Cube right now, and I think we quite like it. I quite like it anyway.
Yes, I mean the version. When we say this is in the Mitgo Vintage Cube, It sort of is, but really what's going on is that Pyroglyph's a messed up card, Baroglyph is a messed up card. We might do a little bit of synergy stuff on top of that. But if we don't have either of those cards, we're not drafting a Delerium deck, And to claim our Pyroglyph deck is a Delerium deck is maybe, I mean, not a lie, but it's not, it's maybe not 100%
more of a stretch,
accurate.
yes.
Yeah. And to be honest, there's a lot of, if you get to have your Pyroglyph stick around, there's quite a few ways to combo it with it. Like, Phantasmal Image is almost universally lethal on a Pyroglyph, which is cool. But I think this translates really well, slightly lower down the power level scale. There's some pretty cool payoffs for Delirium stuff, and it's a nice little deck building quest, isn't it? I like that it makes you keep track of different stuff. It's not just, I need to mill myself, or I just need to put creatures in the graveyard. It's like, so often if you care about Delirium, you're making picks mid-draft and you're like, oh, well, this instant speed removal spell is slightly better, but I have like 5 instants in my deck already and I only have 1 sorcery. So to enable a better mix of types, I should take the sorcery, stuff like that. And it just adds a little bit more texture to the draft, right? Which is cool. There's some interesting playoffs, stuff like Traverse Vuelenwald becomes very powerful. Tutor Shifting Woodland is a card I'm pretty high on in general. That's for land where if you pay 4 mana, if you have Delirium, it becomes a copy of a permanent in the graveyard. So obviously if you're milling yourself, you're giving yourself more options for that, and then it can become very, very powerful late game. And even things like Fear of Missing Out that can kill people pretty rapidly if you have once you have Delirium going. And even there's even like some slightly lower power level, slightly less efficient stuff that does work quite well in the right cube. Convert to Slime is a card I don't think we really talked about much when it came out, but it's 5 mana sorcery, 3 in a green and a black for destroy up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, and up to 1 target enchantment. But if you have Delirium, you then create an XX green ooze where X is the total mana value of permanents destroyed this way. Actually,
that's
kind of
cool.
Powerful, yeah.
It was in the commander set. We do our best.
I refuse to read the commander sets, to be honest.
I add those.
If someone on Reddit isn't telling me the cards are good, then they're not making it in.
But no, one thing I like about this strategy as well is you mentioned that it's a nice deck building construction when you're drafting. But I like it it's also a very cool cube building construction because it kind of like rewards, I like going quite deep on this because I'm a bit of I have a cube podcast. That's how much I like cube and kind of getting into the nitty gritty. But basically things like fetch lands are great in these decks because it puts a land into the graveyard. Things like the baubles we like. But going deep as running like a blood fountain, it's a discard. It creates blood tokens which discard, but it puts itself into the graveyard. We've mentioned Bitter Union, but also running a card like Bitter Blossom might not be the most obvious card to run in a graveyard deck, but it is a kindred type, it's a kindred type and an enchantment. That's 2 types in your graveyard. That makes your Grimflayer turn on quicker. It makes your Baroglyph the bigger. And it also makes you focus on cards that are multiple types. So like in my cube where I have a version of this deck, I run Dryad Arbor as a mana dork because it is a land and a creature, and you can also do the thing where you find it off of Green Sun Zenith, which is quite fun. But also I'm going as deep as I'm running Brain Maggot, which is like a Cavern Bat effect. Older people will know Brain Maggot, but effectively it's a 1 in a black 1/1 enchantment creature. When it enters, target opponent reveals their hand, and you choose a non-land card from it, and you exile it until Brain Maggot leaps. So it's a hand attack spell that we probably want anyway, but it's also an enchantment creature. So that's 2 types for our Delirium deck. You can go that deep, and I find it to be quite rewarding. And one thing that we've touched on that's cool is that I think this also works in a variety of power levels. Like in the higher power level ones, you can go. It works really nicely with the survival of the fittest, Vengevine type stuff. You can go as deep as the Root Wallers as you want, but you don't have to go that ham. You can go more Grimflayer, Balustrade Worm, that kind of stuff, and it's like a cool synergy deck that kind of gets better when you do the thing, and I quite like that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting space to play around in. There's lots of potential, depending on how committed you are. I think it's good to have some stuff. If you're going as deep as playing, the Kindreds and whatnot, you do want to try and have some payoffs that care about total number of types rather than just getting to 4 for Delirium, because you can get to 4 for Delirium perfectly well without Kindred and whatnot,
No, I agree. And it's not, when I've gone as deep as Kindred, I'm not running bad ones. Like, by that, I'm running Bitter Blossom and what's the Goblin Shock? Tarfire. I'm going as, like I would run a Shock I would run a version of Shock if it's synergized with something. That's a fine level of synergy to run, basically. I'm going to run some red removal spells. Might as well run this to make my Tarmogoyf that bit bigger. And yeah, I know Tarmogoyf has been power crept out of the highest power level of cubes, but in most budget and mid-range cubes, wild to actually say Tarmogoyf is a budget card now, but Tarmogoyf is going to be a great card in more mid-rangey, more like starter cubes, where I think this is like it's a great payoff there for this kind of deck. Like I'm very high on Delirium, but it does just show the kind of, if you just add graveyard cards to a cube that do different things, the deck isn't going to come together. You need that focus. Like the 3 decks we've gone over, the number of creature cards in graveyard wants different cards to the cards leaving my graveyard deck, which wants different cards to the number of type cards in my deck. This is a massive mistake I see in Commander, but this is not a Commander podcast. This is a Cube podcast, and we can help you fix them. Like follow the things that we've said, and your graveyard decks will be more focused, and they will start putting up numbers that little bit better, basically. So we're gonna. I was gonna say we're leaving the graveyard, but in Golgari the graveyard is always sort of there. But we are going to move on to less specifically all-in graveyard decks. Let's touch on to one that I really love, and it is one for lower power level cubes, and it's Golgari Aggro. This is kind of like a less powerful version of Delirium, because we don't have like the huge power outliers of like the Barrow-Goyf and the Pyro-Goyf, that kind of stuff. But what this deck is doing is it's an aggro deck that uses recursive creatures to keep coming back from your graveyard. So this is nowhere as explosive as like Boros, but it's good in a world where you are getting to like the mid game and the late game consistently. And like by that I mean where games are taking a bit longer. Where this deck is good is because effectively all your threats have the ability to come back from the graveyard, so your opponent can't 1-for-1 you. They can't trade off in combat as much. They can't use their removal spell to just kill your creature because it's going to come back. So we've gone over some good recursive creatures already with things like Bloodghast, but you also have like unearthed creatures. You have Gutter Bones. You have all the vast swathe of recursive black 1-drops and 2-drops. These all kind of can get into this deck. And then on top of that, you can just run good cards, like things like Rotting Regisaur or like Hex Drinker. These are aggressive slanted cards in these colors that go quite nicely. Like we're probably not getting, like, from power level point of view, this isn't going in a cube with Scythe Cat Cub, but like that would be a great, like, just generically aggressive card in here. And like I think this is a very solid archetype for like a lower powered level or a budget cube. James, what do you think of like Golgari Aggro? Again, not normally what Golgari is known for, but it is something that if you're looking for something a bit different in your Golgari section, say you're listening to this episode and you're like, I hate graveyard decks. When are we going to talk about something else? This is something you can do.
I'm not sure I believe in this one quite as much, to be honest. Like, the black aggro with the cheap recursive creatures, sure, if you have enough ways to punch through, it can get it done. I guess I'm not really sure what green is bringing to the party here a lot of time.
But James, have you not heard of Dreadmangler? One black-green for a 3/3 with haste and scavenge.
I hadn't heard of Dreadmangler.
Proper magic cards here, James. And what about Putrid Leech, James? That's also a banger magic card. Black and a green for a 2/2 where you can pay 2 life and it gets +2/+2 hit until end of turn.
That is certainly a magic card you could play.
Again, I am not saying for higher powered level cubes. I think for lower powered level and budget cubes, this is a cool way of taking Golgari.
Okay, that's fair. I like a Rakshasa Death Dealer. Can we get one of those?
There we go. Yeah. Okay, that's a rare. Good. Yes, well done.
Cool.
that kind of thing. Golgari can be punchy. Like basically, the green gives you access to like overcosted like beaters because effectively it's kind of like we're going to run like. The curve will probably stop around like 3-ish, but like say we run like a Mana Gorger Hydra or a Jade like Ranger as our top end, but then the Unearth can bring it back, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, I guess. Yeah, like the Ursine Monstrosity would be really good here, right? Get a bit of that self-mill going, it gets giant. Sure, I can get behind that.
Again, yeah, this is not going to be one for a large number of cubes, but it is a cool, different thing you can do with it if you are looking for something that isn't a graveyard deck. I think it's probably worth touching on now. Like we touched on it at the start, the generic Golgari Midrange deck. We all know what it looks like. You've drafted all your removal, you've drafted some ramp, and yeah, you lose to blue decks in a high power level cube. But in a lower power level cube, it is a solid archetype, but you do need to keep some things in mind. Kind of like if you are going specifically, Golgari is going to be mid range. Make sure you have some rewards for your players. I'm thinking like things like Abrupt Decay in your Golgari section, things like Pernicious Deed, maybe some good value grindy planeswalkers. Like there's a really good Vraska Relic Seeker, 4 black and a green, 6 starting loyalty, +2, create a 2/2 pirate token with menace, -3 destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment, create a colorless treasure token, and a -10 of target player's life total becomes 1. If you're going mid-range, actually go mid-range. This is kind of why it doesn't work in higher power level queues, because it's not a mid-range deck, it's just the best cards you could get from green and black in an environment where mid-range doesn't exist. But in a world where mid-range does exist, you have those cards, but you also want to lean into it and actually make it work, like make it signpost that kind of like Golgari is going big and going, or it is going a bit bigger, a bit slower. You can grind your opponents out, and like I think things like big planeswalkers, like the Vraska, or maybe a card like Liliana Dreadhorde General, another 6-mana planeswalker that's just really good at grinding. So if you want that mid-range deck to exist, good, but lean into it is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the thing you've always got to be careful about with these mid-range decks, right, is people just going a bit bigger, going over the top of you, because you're often not going to be able to kill them quickly enough to stop that. So things you really want to prioritize to get around that is interaction that is not just kill your creature once it's in play. You really want to be looking at some hand attack, maybe even a bit of mana disruption can go a really long way. I think the reason people sometimes fall into this trap, right, is that when you come from Booster Draft, most decks in Booster Draft, whilst they have a bunch of synergies going on within this, they are ultimately mostly piles of creatures and removal spells with maybe a bit of card draw in there. And most cubes will have some decks which aren't just that. Some decks will be operating on a slightly different axis, and they will have a way to go over the top of you, which you can't solve with a removal spell, right?
Yeah, like take a Storm deck. Like what does your Doomblade do against a deck with no creatures?
Yeah, or even just like, a ramp deck that's casting some like stupid 10-drop, right? It's removal's not going to get it done, and that's fine if you're an aggressive deck because you're trying to kill them before they do their thing. You run the risk if you're a mid-range deck of being too slow to get underneath them, but don't have the interaction to stop them like a blue deck would. So yeah, I think the hand attack is super, super important for that reason. But outside of that, yeah, this can work. It can do quite well sometimes beating up on the slightly smaller aggro decks, right? Because your creatures are just bigger. You can go a little bit bigger than them. That's a nice place to be.
I think another good way of explaining where this deck can work is if there are other mid-range decks. If you're doing mid-range in other decks, or if mid-range exists in your cube already, then this can be a nice complement to it. it being the only mid-range deck is probably a sign that maybe mid-range doesn't really work in your cube. Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. All right, but let's keep going. We have a couple more to get through today. Another thing you can do in Golgari, like we've touched on one combo already with chain and smog combos, but there are other creature combos. We'll keep this one a little brief because we have done a whole episode on things like persist. But Golgari is a great base for a bunch of creature combos. Things like persist we've gone over in the past, and we will put a link to that down to that episode in the show notes below. There's also a bunch of other combos. There's like Gravecaller combos. There's food-based combos. They all fit really well in the Golgari spectrum because Golgari has things like Sacrifice Outlets in black. It has Creature Tutors in green. It's quite solid at putting these different pieces together. Kind of like, what's your experience with creature combos, James, and like where do you like them?
Yeah, these can play out well. You've got to prioritize those ways to set it up. You want to prioritize a little bit of disruption. Like again, hand attack huge here because creature combos can generally be disrupted by removal spells. And often in a way that works out very poorly for you as the combo player. So you want a way to get out ahead of that and at least know what your opponent's working with in terms of removal. But yeah, we've seen a lot of interesting new cards in this space, right? Stuff like Orange Soul Trader is really good for this sort of creature combo deck. Yeah, all the food stuff works really well. And generally, you're not like a pure combo deck, right? You often have a bit of beatdowny stuff or a little bit of aristocracy stuff because a lot of these combos are like sacrifice based. But then you also have a combo kill that can finish them off in the right spot.
No, exactly. And one of the things I quite like about these kind of combos in the Golgari range is that it's not just all the combo cards are in one color and the other one is like the support. What's nice is the kind of like we get like a bunch of persist creatures in black, but then you get the things that put counters on them generally in green. What's nice about the food combos is that a bunch of the like card draw and payoffy cards are in green, but the actual combo enabler, is a black card. Like what's nice is kind of it's not just like it's nice that both colors bring something to the party here, which I quite like.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, keeping the ball rolling, we have two more to get to before we finish up for today. Another cool way you can take your Golgari deck or your Golgari section is focusing on lands. Like a card like Squandered Resources and the Gitrog are both awesome cards. Let me read Squandered Resources. Squandered Resources is black and a green for an enchantment. Sacrifice a land. Add to your mana pool 1 mana of any type the sacrifice land can produce. Play this ability as a mana source. Can you tell that Scryfall is down and I'm reading the version that I have from Moxfield? And the Gitrog monster obviously draws you cards whenever a land goes to your graveyard. That one I'm doing from memory, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Golgari and Jund lands is definitely a thing that kind of people play a lot of in Commander, but there's a bunch of cool things you can do with it in Cube. And like, what's your experience with this type of deck been?
Yeah, I think this can work pretty well. We're going to do a whole episode on lands at some point, so more details to be added there. But I think Golgari can be a nice home for it. I think there's a slightly more graveyard-centric version of the lands deck that exists. Yeah, cards like Worm Harvest really good here. Just dump all your lands, all your lands into your graveyard. That's Worm Harvest. Make a bunch of dudes. There's also cards like Aftermath Analyst that then return all your lands from your graveyard. You get value as all your cards change zones. We like all of this stuff. Really into like Vein of Filth is a really powerful mana generation engine here as well. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff in this space, and we are getting new cards for it. A card like Luan from the recent sets is pretty powerful here. It's like 2 mana 1/3 mills you when it enters, and then you can tap it to cast Worm Harvest for 5 mana. That's pretty powerful. Get that effect repeatedly is pretty good.
Nice, yeah, and also like Golgari is a nice kind of home for the like Titania deck as well. Titania, like the 5 mana one that ETBs brings a land back, but then whenever you sack a land, you make a 5. Is it a 5/3?
5/3, yeah.
Like that in a deck with tutors that you get from black and some removal seems pretty good. Like that seems like a great way of kind of like you mid range, you kind of like you 1-for-1 them, and then you turn all your lands into 5/3s and mush them.
Yes.
That's a nice home for that.
Yeah, for sure. The Titania combo stuff is just super powerful all around. It's obviously better in a Lands deck, right? Because Titania as a standalone card is good in a Lands deck, where it isn't in just a generic more mid-rangey deck. But the combination of Titania with something like Zeranorb or something like Sylvan Safekeeper, any way to sacrifice your lands, is just a super powerful A+B combo that will win you the game most of the time. And doesn't have to be in a dedicated lands deck to support it. But yeah, certainly better when it is.
Yeah, this is a cool one. And yeah, an episode coming on that soon. The last one we're going to touch on is one for the boomers out there. I include myself in this. I'm only 36. Don't worry about it. This is like Rex Pod is kind of what it's labeled as. Like, there is a phenomenal cube article. I think it's on MTG Salvation, which is like what I started using when I started building cubes. And it was basically it went through. It's like from like 2012 or something like that. But it's going through all of the cube archetypes that are sustainable. It's got like OG Storm in there. Like if you've been playing, I'll try and find it and put a link down to it in the show notes, because it is like a blast from the past. If you see it, it's like what Vintage Cube used to be like 10, 15 years ago. It's a very good read, and it's a basis to a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past. It's a great article, but it has Rexapod in it. What that is this is the ultimate grindy value deck. It's combining Recurring Nightmare, that's the Rec, Survival of the Fittest, that's the Sir, and Birthing Pod is the Pod. You are combining these three slow engines to get the ultimate value. So like Recurring Nightmare is a way of repeatedly getting creatures back from the graveyard for value. Survival of the Fittest tutors them out of your deck and also puts stuff into your graveyard. And then Birthing Pod is another way of sacrificing stuff for value. So when you get this engine together, you're kind of getting bigger and better it's generally abusing like ETB effects to kind of build this kind of awesome value engine. Like, you're probably going to be, what's the card at the time? Probably a Shriekmaw is going to be in here, an Eternal Witness, maybe a Bone Shredder, all of the Golgari goodness. It's kind of combining these into a cool deck. And what's nice is like this has got some bits over the last couple of years. Like Chthonian Nightmare is a cool Recurring Nightmare variant from the last Modern Horizons that's good with smaller creatures. We've got a bunch of Survival of the Fittest effects, like most recently Formidable Speaker is a nice one-off effect. And then actually, like, where I've actually seen this deck actually still pull up numbers in more recent cubes is when you combine it with a card like Gruff Triplets. Gruff Triplets is 6 mana for a 3/3 Satyr Warrior with Trample. When it enters the battlefield, if it isn't a token, create 2 tokens that are copies of it. When it dies, put a number of +1 counters equal to its power on each creature you control named Gruff Triplets. So how this works is when it dies, you get 2 copies of it. Then when they die, you get another one, and kind of you keep. It gets really powerful when you're sacking it and recurring it every turn. It's very, very fun. This deck is cool but slow. James, what do you think of this?
Yeah, this deck is great. Love all of this. It's so much fun when you have survival going. Hot take. I kind of think Chthonian Nightmare is more fun than survival. Because...
Is that 1 mana cheaper just makes it?
It's a mana cheaper, and the issue with survival is that sometimes when you have a really good survival deck, you're looking at, like, you get this Gristlebrand or something, and then you're like, oh, it makes sense for me to just put the Gristlebrand in my deck, and then I reanimate the Gristlebrand and win. And he's like, that's fine, but what I want to do, because what's cooler to me is get back an Eternal Witness, you know, or I get back my Reef or something, you know. I want to do the grindy thing, not the just like, oops, I have an 8-drop, I win thing. And it's cool that I think that Chthonian Nightmare puts that restriction on you, you know.
Yeah, this is a deck I don't want to say I'm going to build another cube to make it work, because I can't do that. Financially, I'm already ruined, James. So emotionally, but like emotionally, I don't have the time. I know I owe people. I need to finish off building a bar cube on stream as well as the modern one. Blah blah blah. But this is awesome. Like. I mean, these are all. Birthing Pod isn't like of these cards. The one that I think has shown its age the most is Birthing Pod. But like, you can still do something with Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest. Like, I have them in my unpowered Vintage Cube. Like, is Recurring Nightmare still in the Mitgo Vintage Cube or Chthonian Nightmare?
They go in and out. I think they're in at the moment. Like, they're not very good, but they're there, you know?
But like, I would. Mine is probably too fast for this, but like, I think they still get in from Vibes. But like, one thing is like these cards are kind of expensive. Like Recurring Nightmare and Survival of the Fittest is not cheap Magic cards. But if you're doing a mid powered cube or a low powered level cube, where you're proxying it, if you're just building a cube just based on cards that you like, I think this is phenomenal. I'm saying this, and like this is kind of like this. The thing is, like this deck here became the one we started the episode on, telling people to avoid in powered cube. This is the grindy mid-range deck. The fact that like this was from a time where Recurring Nightmare and Survival were like the most broken cards, and like Survival was banned in a bunch of formats. It still is banned in a bunch of formats, but like this is just cool. This is vibes. I like looking at these cards, and I like playing with them. Like unban Recurring Nightmare in Commander so I can play with it. Then I get my toys. But I really like this deck. I would like to play it more, basically.
Yes, for sure. I think this deck is really cool. You could get this. I think you could make this deck work in not in Treat Yourself. It's a bit good for Treat Yourself, isn't it?
Like it is effectively in my main cube. Like the only card in here that isn't in that cube is Birthing Pod. Like I have in the rebuild, I have Chthonian Nightmare, I have Recurring Nightmare, I have Survival, I have Formidable Speaker. I don't think I have. There's the 2-mana one that I think has been just cut from a power level point of view. Like the 2-mana creature repeatable one, but like, yeah, I think this will be like a version of this will be fine. I think.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you need to build another cube to play this. That's what I'm saying.
We will make it work. We will make it work. If my wife is listening to this, it's going to be okay. All right. But I think that's where we're going to call this part of the episode to end. I hope people have got some ideas for things they can do with their cubes if you're struggling on what to do with Golgari, or if you have one of these archetypes, how you can kind of tailor it and kind of fine-tune it that is a bit more, kind of like do the how you can focus it on the things that are important. I think one thing we do want to do before we get out of it is just touch on what we have in our own cubes, because as we've gone over, we have a lot of cubes. So my main cube, I do have I have the pieces for the Rexa minus pod deck, but generally I'm doing the Delerium there. That's mainly what I'm focusing on. I have I'm trying to fill up my graveyard with different types of things. As I said, I have cut it back to be as deep on the Bitter Blossom Tarfire type of effects, but I am running things like Bitter Reunion. I am running things like I'm running a card like Seal of Fire as a removal spell. That's a single red for an enchantment. Sacrifice it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. That's kind of what I'm doing with it. Like so for me, I am going. My Golgari is more. I know I just said a red card, but my Golgari is more trying to get different types of things, because my cube is powerful enough to have a Pyrogoyf in it and it to be a good power level there. That's kind of where I'm with it. James, you have a couple of cubes. Your dual commander cube, for example, what's Golgari doing there?
Yeah, so sort of a couple of things, really, because it's more of a 3-color focus type of cube. But the big things we're doing are very into the land stuff. And I've seen that graveyardy land deck come together really nicely here. There was a Gitrog monster commander deck doing some absolutely revolting stuff where you just sack all your lands, you have to analyst them back, you sack them again, you're drawing so many cards, you're making so much mana. That's come together really nicely. And then you have cards like White of the Reliquary, Luan will support that really nicely. And then it's doing more creature combo-y stuff as well. With it's good at setting up these graveyard combos pretty nicely. And we have stuff like Hogak as options as well. But yeah, they think things like Fiend Artisan setting up for creature combos has worked quite well.
Nice. And then the other cube that I play most is my Treat Yourself one, which is a bit different actually because it's based on like tricolor archetypes. But specifically in Abzan, I'm doing the food deck. Food Fight is a lot of fun. Links to all these will be down in the show notes below. And then, but in Sultai, it is the full-on. It is labeled as Graveyard Shenanigans, but it is the Insidious Roots deck. It's specifically putting things into our graveyard and moving them around zones and profit. That's what the deck is doing. Like Tevel, the Balance Scale is an incredible card here. So is Insidious Roots. Like that is really what it is trying to do. But yeah, with all that being said, I hope people have found that helpful, and I hope people have enjoyed us talking about the goodness that is Golgari. I'm always here to talk about it. James, pleasure, man. Thank you. That was really good.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Nice one. All right, just leaves me to thank you all very much for listening. Do make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give the podcast a 5-star review, tell a friend. We'd love to have them here. But until next time, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. You'll take care. Goodbye.